Okay, well, thank you, Emily, thanks, and thank you all for coming. It's really a pleasure to be here at Berkeley again. So in my talk today, I'm going to tell a story about Moroccan detainees who were held for so many years at secret camp. The story is pretty, terrible one. It has a lot of twists and puzzles and a big question. And I would like to address that question. So beyond death and survival in, under difficult circumstances, how do you survive? The story I'm about to tell really has a broader theme, which is the role of what social psychologists and organizational behavior call emotional intelligence. My talk today will be mainly on the first part, how I came to the conclusion that something really else is going on about life and survival, death and survival, beyond the structure of the conflict, beyond the material conditions where these people live. So I'm going to proceed by process of eliminating the different possibilities that might explain why some people survived and others didn't. And for me, this concept of emotional intelligence, one has to take it with some skepticism or caution. But it is mainly used to really explain conflicts within environments of work, organizations. But when I was doing research on this topic, I found, wow, this really looks exactly like the kind of features and characteristics that are described in this kind of research, this kind of literature. And, but it has never been applied to contexts where under duress, where there is really strife and survival. And without jumping to the conclusion, I might think that it is something that we might have to start considering when thinking about the Middle East. I mean, this is a really big jump, and then, of course, it's just like the beginning of my work. But I think that there is something there beyond the structure of the conflict itself, the symmetries of power, or the material conditions that one may have to start taking into consideration when we think about conflict in the Middle East. This project is also part of broader interests of mine, and that is the question of the individual, of the pressure of social norms, group pressure, when we think about societies in the Middle East. And the general, I think, assumption is that the individual really does not count, that there is, social pressure is very heavy, social norms. But I have conducted surveys, survey experiments in Morocco, in Pakistan, and now I'm doing some in Turkey. And while the general findings that while social norms are really important, there is much more room for individual autonomy. And as we see it, I mean, I was really surprised. And I will talk about it a little bit later, perhaps during the question and answer. So let me begin by just give you some kind of background. But what I'm talking about here. So I'm talking about 58 prisoners who disappeared in 1973. One of them took part in a military coup d'etat that took place in 1971 against King Hassan. They are all from the army, basically. They were like, some officers, some non-officers. The second group are also military in the Moroccan military, but they are in the Air Force. They also attempted a coup d'etat in 1972. The senior officers who were involved in these coup d'etats were executed immediately. About hundreds of the others were tried. and they were sentenced to about from 3 to 20 years or life imprisonment. So they were, in 1973, they were serving their sentences in the death row corridor of civilian prison in Kenitra, which is a little bit up north of Rabat. On August 8, at 2 o'clock in the morning, there was like banging in the headquarters where they were arrested. Various security services arrived. They were blindfolded, handcuffed, put in military trucks, driven to a military base in Kenitra, and then flown to an unknown destination. They end up in a small town called Arish. It's not really, you don't see it quite clearly there. It's right on the edge of the Atlas Mountains, further from the border of Algeria. And they were put in a detention camp called Tazmamart. So the detention camp, this is very much a cul-de-sac. It's in the middle of nowhere. They have no idea where they are. They flew at 2 o'clock in the morning. They must have arrived, I think, around like 6 o'clock or around that time. It was still dark. They were lined up. The one thing I would call attention to is that if you see these two buildings, I mean, first of all, there's this wall, 4 meters high walls, and then another extension wall. There are posts there. There's nowhere to leave or escape. There are some military bases there because this is like around Algeria. This was an old French military base used by during the war in Algeria. But here are the two buildings where they were kept, A and B. Those are basically like bunkers. I mean, they don't look that way from, but they're really built with heavy cement and steel, and they are like basically cells. There were exactly 58 cells there. I mean, if we count them, there is a door in the middle, but there are like about 29 in each one of those buildings. So they were arrested, on August 8, they were arrested there. They were blindfolded. They were put on those cells, and it's total darkness. I mean, some of the readings that I have done on some survived, to let us know what happened, and it was like finally they found themselves like in total darkness, small cells. I think I had the. This is basically what the prison looks like. Here you notice that there are some. There were like tombs where they were supposed to go. Basically, just holes. The idea is that when they went there, the purpose was that they were never going to leave. That they were sent there inside, that they are not going to come out alive from this, and nobody is going to hear about them. Now, here's the kind of the puzzle or the question. So as I said, I mean, they were arrested in 1973. Some of them were released in 1991, September 15th. But there is a huge discrepancy in terms of death rates. In building 1, the one that we saw was a little bit high, we have like 29, 8 of them died. In building B, 29, 22 died, and only 7 survived. So in terms of the probability of something like that happening just like not without an external interference is really extremely low both for the survival rate and for the death rate. But if you put them together, it's even lower. I didn't even bother to calculate it. I mean, just asking graduate students to do it for me, actually. But it's already extremely low. So there has to be some kind of explanation. It cannot be just like natural conditions. So I said, well, this is really interesting. I mean, what could have been done? What's really went wrong in this situation? So there are a number of explanations. I mean, that we can, I started thinking about, that I searched. One is detainment conditions. Even though it's the same camp, even though it is the same buildings, maybe detainment conditions were different somehow. Didn't explain much. The second is demographics. Well, perhaps just by accident, those who are older or less healthy were in building B and therefore didn't survive. That didn't work. Prison sentences could be an explanation. Well, if you have, for example, if you were sentenced to 3 years, when your 3 years are up and you don't get released, you can get depressed and less willing, you lose the will to live. But once I calculated the average sentencing year on each building, it didn't provide an explanation. A fourth possible explanation, there was some kind of disease that somehow in building B, some people got sick and there was contagion and people died. Didn't hold. And another one is social networks. That is possibly people, detainees whose families were closer to Tazmalt Mert, to the Eritrea village, may have had some access to friends, to family support, and therefore they managed to survive. And this social network argument has been used in various studies, from the Nazi concentration camps to the Gulag in Soviet Union. It didn't work in this case, and I'm going to show each one of them. I'll keep switching that. So if you think of a possible other explanation, I'll be very happy to hear it, because I'm still doing the research on this, and I think I would like to consider different possibilities. Okay, starting with the conditions of the living conditions of the detainees. Here we have basically a schema of two cells, one next to each other. They were very small, 3 meters on 2, and they are all almost identical in the two buildings. There is this, what you see here, this is a form of toilet. This is just like scrap of cement, just a big lump of cement where they were sitting. There were like some 13 holes here for aeration. They had like access to 1 plastic plate and 5 liters of water. It was exactly the same kind of system, for all of them in the two buildings. Their daily routines were exactly the same. The food rations, which was really terrible. Basically, lunch and dinner was boiled water in salt, and either chickpeas, between 8 and 13 chickpeas. Some of them they used actually to tell each other, how many chickpeas did you get? And one said, well, I have 9. One said, well, I have 8. Others, if they are lucky, they got 15. If they didn't have chickpeas, they'd have like lentils with small stones, some kind of noodles, thin scrapped noodles. That was lunch and dinner, and 250 grams of bread that was really hard, and 5 liters of water. In the morning, and this is exactly the same service that has been going on for 18 years. The guards were very unwilling to talk to me, but I managed to talk to one of them who worked in A, but he also worked in B at the end of the 18 years. So it was exactly the same food, they lacked hygiene. During 18 years, they never saw a doctor, a hairdresser, a dentist. They lacked the most basic access to hygiene. They changed their clothes every 2 years. Basically, they just like pants and shirts. And they basically they used them for winter and summer. in that area, even though it is Morocco, winter can be really, really below freezing temperature for about almost 8 months. And for 3 months, it's about like 40 degrees, which is 104, I think, Fahrenheit or something like that. So there is some kind of, these are the accounts that I have read in the survivors' memoirs, because we have about like 7 or 8 of them, even though very few survived. And when I checked the temperature of Arish during that period, it didn't quite match, but I imagine that when you're inside the bunker, it can be must feel colder, but the water also froze. So it's really reliable accounts. So the guards who are guarding them, basically, they were like a team of 18 guards. They had a director, and they were like 18 guards who were always rotating. And since this was very, very secretive, it was really extremely harsh on the guards themselves. They were very watched very closely. They could not talk to the detainees. They could not communicate with them. Otherwise, they would risk joining them in those kind of in that atmosphere. So in general, I feel confident to say that the discrepancy between the two buildings cannot be explained by detainment conditions, no matter how we look at it. I have examined very closely, and perhaps you can point out to some of the issues. Okay, one issue that really was I think it was very challenging to me in terms of explaining the discrepancy rates. First, let me just show that the dark red are the detainees who died in building B. The light are those who survived. The blue ones, the dark blue, are those who died in building A, and the light blue are those who survived. And the black one that's the door. So in some of in the memoirs of one of the people who survived in building B, he talked about septic tank. He said, because I kept, I didn't want to ask directly the questions, why so many of you died or how many survived, but in a way the conversations evolved, and he told me that there was a septic tank under building B. And that is, they had a lot of water coming out from the toilets, inundations, and this. So I said, wow, this is going to be a problem, because this is it. This is what's explained. But in others, when both through interviews, but also from the readings, that the overflowing of water of toilets happens also in this one, in building A. And the guard whom I interviewed say that actually the sewage goes all the way out to the town, outside the walls. It does not just stop there. So I'm not really quite sure, but I don't have the size of the septic tank. I don't know how far it's extended, but I imagine since the two buildings are identical, it will go from here to here, and it will go from here to there. But if that were the case, we are going to see that these two should not have survived. And these two here should not have survived because they have septic tank there. So something is not really holding. And also that I found that when they brought these trucks to evacuate the waters, it happened also in building A. And I found evidence that one of the prisoners was moved at some point from one to another because of the flow of water. So it happened within a period of more than 18 years. I think there were like 3 cases where somebody came to evacuate the water. So for me, it doesn't really explain much. So, and that will be also, I think that the East-West difference should be more dead people in the East on both sides, but that's not the case. It's simply couldn't find evidence for that. So as I said, I mean, the general kind of the determined conditions don't explain it. One, the next plausible explanation is that, well, there's an age difference. That's basically those who are older could not survive because they are too old. But if we look at the average age that in building A, they are very close to each other. I mean, even those who are younger, 27 and younger, lived less. I mean, those who are older managed to survive. So the age difference does definitely clearly not, I mean, it has to be like, difference between 5 or 15 years, but like 1 or 2 years, it's hard to think that that will really make a difference. That will explain why building B had more deceased. Also, function of demographics is the relationship between the number of officers and non-officers. So as I said in the beginning, some of these, military who participated in the coup d'etats were like captains or lieutenants. Those are the officers. Others were lower ranks. So we could say, well, possibly the buildings that have more officers, maybe they have more strategy, better strategy to organize, maybe, and those who are less, or the vice versa. Perhaps those who were not officers were more, they're still there physically. And here there is a slight difference. I think that there were more officers in building A. They had 16 officers, lieutenants or captains, and 13 non-officers. In building B, they had only 9 officers and 20 of them. But I don't think that this is, I mean, even if the officer, presence of more officers in building A is an explanation, I think it really perhaps supports my argument that, well, there has to be something with the emotional intelligence. There is leadership, emotional intelligence attached to leadership, to bringing the folds together. So it does not really weaken my argument. It might give it a little bit of strength. But I don't think that the difference of officers and non-officers is the most important one. I mean, the one that I thought would make a huge difference. But yeah, this is before I get to that, this is the deaths among officers and non-officers. Here we see that in building A, only 2 officers died, and more non-officers died, whereas the other one, it's like 7. That's a huge loss. If we think that officers made a difference when you are in that environment, secluded, in darkness, that you need some kind of cooperation, some kind of, officers will play an important role, and they lost a lot of them, I think, in some early years, and that could have an impact. But what I think is the most important distinction will be between the Army and the Air Force. Why? The Army in Morocco at that time tended to recruit from modest rural backgrounds that were basically has specific, kind of group of population, whereas the Air Force were more educated, they were more trained, and therefore that will really make a kind of difference if you have people who are. But that doesn't explain anything, because we have exactly the same numbers between the two. So it does not provide an explanation. I mean, just to give you an example, this is, for example, one of the detainees, Salah Hashad. He was an Air Force pilot. He came from fairly wealthy backgrounds. He played an important role in building A for survival. I mean, he was trained. He went to the Air Force School in France. I mean, I lost the circle around there. It's not clear. He came to the United States. He was in one of the air bases in Oklahoma. He was one of the few who became a pilot, who participated in the international, formations after graduation in the United States. And there are various, other members who were also part of this. So I think we're talking about some skills, some organizations, and I read in the memoirs the amazing work that some of these people did, even with those conditions, talking about a human agency within constraints. It's an incredible story. Another explanation as I said, is the number of years that you have been sentenced to. I mean, if you have been sentenced for 20 years, you are not going to be as affected by detainment as if you were detained for 3 years, let's say. But again, the differences between the two buildings is not as important. I mean, 5, 6. It's very close. The point is, sentences don't provide a good explanation for the discrepancy in the death. Finally, the last one is the question of contagion. Is it possible that somehow building B had some kind of disease that killed a lot of people there? This is from the building A. Well, we have different reasons why people die. We have the cell numbers, the day of death. Sometimes the day of death, as I found, there are like 3 days or 4 days off. But the point is, there is no sign. I mean, these kind of diseases are very familiar. We see them in the Civil War, the American Civil War, among the prisoners of war, in Nazi camps, in others. They are exactly the same kind of diseases that we have seen in various situations. But here is one thing that I will call attention to, and that is terminal psychosis. Just for the moment, just think about that. Otherwise, the very reasons why, the causes of death are very, they're very similar to what we have seen in other cases of concentration camps. I'm sorry to have this information. It's not, this is terrible stuff, but the point I think is really, for me, it is important. But look at here, the high number of terminal psychosis. People or detainees who were simply lost their minds in building B is much higher. This has to do with emotional support, with the lack of emotional support that many simply could not handle it anymore. And there was a really kind of curious pattern where the detainees who were less engaged, imagine that you are in a building, it's dark, you are in cells, you are there. How are you going to keep track of time? How are you going to how are you going to communicate? And the first day, after 1 hour of shock, when they tried to communicate with each other, it was completely incomprehensible because of the echo. Like inside the building, everybody's trying to talk. The trick was for them how to organize their time, how to communicate with each other. That was an extremely important part for surviving, but it's asked for leadership. It's required. So in the other building, unfortunately, that did not happen. It was much more chaotic, no organizations. In memoirs, we talk about like different groups. Our group, as opposed to East and West, some who never say a word for 15 or years, especially those who died from terminal psychosis. Like once they were asked to say a word, they would say something really strange and think, okay, and then they fall again into silence until they die. Okay, so there was no contagion that explained the difference. Now, the idea of the social network is a very powerful one. We have seen it in much of the research and literature on concentration camps, on the prisoners of war during the Civil War. I really provide that as an explanation. So here, this is Esme Mert. No. right here. So the, oh, I think I switched back. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the idea is that if you live closer to here, you are more likely to have contact with some of the family members than if you live here or there. But here we see that people who are far away have survived. It does not explain the disposition of the detainees where they come from is not necessarily different from those who survived in Building B. They're all living from exactly the same distance. So it's impossible to say that, well, I mean, the reason why these people survive is because of closeness or proximity to home or to friends. Just simply different. And these are the people who died in Building B. I mean, here we see that actually somebody died who was like only a few kilometers from Tazma Mert. And in Building A as well, I mean, you see that that's somebody who was very close to Tazma Mert who died. So the point is, I mean, distance does not really tell us what, I mean, the social networks that, you know, that you can give, for example, a letter to the guard, they can bring it to they are more likely to bring a message and receive a message from your family if you are close by. I mean, if a guard has to travel all the way somewhere, take the risk, it's not going to happen. Okay, so what I have been trying to establish is to eliminate the death discrepancy between two buildings, A and B. None of the usual explanation really work. Demographics doesn't explain it. Distance or social networks, the environment does not. The guards are the same team, the same discipline. None of that really work. So in this kind of situation, what should be the priority of a prisoner in that situation of detainee? What do you think would be? I mean, when you are there, you are stuck, you are turning with guards. What should be your main priority to survive? What would be? What would you think that would be? Yes?
The other prisoners become my friends, kind of. So if I can somehow communicate with them, so that we support each other.
Yeah, you can communicate with them. It's not going to guarantee you more food. It's not going to guarantee you medicine. But that's the beginning. I mean, you do want to have good relationship with your detainees, with your inmates. So that's definitely part of it. In this case, because they knew, basically after 3 years, when the first detainees who already served their sentences realized that they are not going to be released, they knew, they were convinced that they were there to die. That unless they establish contact with the outside world, they are going to stay inside. And this was really very interesting kind of in the readers in their memoirs, that was a very revelatory moment for them to come to this kind of realization. In order to establish contact with the outside world, you have to deal, the only way you can do it is with the guards. You see them, they come 3 times a day, they turn the lights on, they give you food, they slam the door and leave. Basically, I mean, the time is like, I think it took 10 minutes to serve 29 at one time, very quick, because they ask them to put their food, wallet, clothes, it takes 10 minutes. So in that very short period of time, they had to establish contact with the guards in order to carry a message to the outside world, to know we are here, we are dying, save us. But that is very, very risky kind of contact. Not all detainees will necessarily agree that is the right move. Not all detainees are going to necessarily benefit from that contact, because you are going to make contacts maybe with one guard, and that guard is not going to be able to go to all of these towns and cities where prisoners are. So it requires a lot of convincing, a lot of coordination, a lot of work in order to establish that contact. And that's exactly what happened in Building A. They established their first contact within the first year or a little bit before, after the first year, but the guard was cut. He was cut, he was very serious. They were going to put him next to the other prisoners. And then there was like about 5 years of absolutely no contact whatsoever until another guard came. And I'm going to show a picture of him. He's the one that I interviewed. And they started to reestablish that contact with their families. But the interesting thing is that once they established contact, in the beginning, there was a lot of organization among the detainees, how to basically organize their time. They organized prayer moments. They had somebody waking up in the morning to say the prayers, another person to discuss the Quran, to give lessons. They even had German lessons, Spanish lessons. They had a business model of how to pay a guard, how much to give him. So they have like this 1-3 model where somebody will send the guard to their family. They will bring in money, let's say $500. They will divide it into 3 parts, one for the guard, one to the detainee, and another one to the collective. They had actually a collective for medicine, for money. They were able to bring in transistors to listen to the news. They were established to receive letters, pictures. The question is why this building managed to do this, to access, if they are all equally severe, and in the second building they did not. And the reason is that because there was a lot of divisions among those in the second buildings. That the reason why they will manage to break through the walls to reach outside was really due not to the structure of the conflict, not to hierarchy, not to power relations, not to money. Of course, if you have a family with money, it will help. But I looked at the families in both buildings. They had almost exactly the same number of people who have enough wealth to distribute, but only in Building A were they able to access that wealth or that money from their families to basically make a difference. And here we are going to start from the positive side of the story, and that is basically in their deliverance, 3 women played extraordinary role. One is Christine Dor Serfati. She's the wife of a Moroccan political prisoner who has been detained for about 30 years. She was extremely active in bringing because they contacted her, some members of family from Building A managed to contact her. And it led to the publication of the book that broke the Tazmamart camp. And that is Notre Ami le Roi, Gilles Perrault. I mean, if you know Morocco, if you know Moroccan politics, you're probably familiar with this name. This book made a huge difference. Basically, it criticized France, both Republic, the socialists and no matter what kind of government is in power, they always managed to work with the king and they overlooked the question of a human rights violation. This book exposed to the open. Basically, it was published in 1991 and it contained some of the letters, some of the testimonies of the detainees, and by September 15th, the prisoners, the remaining of the prisoners were released. And Christine Dor Serfati herself published a book around the same time, but with no contact with the families, with no contact, this would not have happened. So these are pictures. There are some of the people who, after more than 18 years, were released from Tazmamart. This is Marzouki, whom I interviewed in that piece that I sent. He is very active. He wrote, all of them basically left memoirs, and then they are really interesting. They're in French, but still, I mean, so we have basically 4 important memoirs from Building A. Salah Shad, the pilot, the elite pilot, Marzouki, another pilot, and then, and these are, I mean, one problem would be that once you made it and you write a book, you may have different perspective on your experience inside Tasman Mart. You might see it more in positive light in terms of relationship with your detainees. They are not. They are very harsh. They are very critical of how relationship of detainees was completely transformed once the money was inside the building, once the medicine was brought in, once information, competition but information became a factor, and how they really had a major conflict. But the point is, they will never cross certain red lights. Because one of the main issues was that if you ask a guard who is willing to work with you to go to every single detained family, that is a recipe for disaster. He is going to be cut. 28 of them, or whatever is left, 25. You ask them, they live in different cities. You ask a guard who has maybe 24 hours or maybe 3 days, and you are asking them to go to Marrakesh, to Fez, to this city. And that meant that some detainees are probably not going to hear from their families. And they were not very happy about it. And it became very clear, very quick, that those detainees that have access to money were the ones because they are going to pay. And that was already within, when you are in the same situation, you are facing death, but there are still hierarchies still there. And they play the role. But in this case, they knew they will never, even, Mohammed Rais, he was very angry. He has a very angry book. And he threatened at some point, said, look, if we don't all benefit, so what's the point? We are running the risks. If we are found that you are bringing medicine, they might all as well shoot us. So he was very critical, and they managed, as I say, to have this system of basically security. You have medicine for the whole group, money for the whole group, and even managed to help the others, the second building at some point. They managed to bribe some of the guards to help the other detainees. From the second building, we have basically only one testimony from the person who was from 1973 all the way to the end. We have survivors, the Burakat brothers. These are 3 brothers who were sent to the prison for different reasons. They are civilians. Because they arrived in 1986 or 87, I could not include them because it's completely changed the variables. But the point is, the 3 brothers were one of the wealthiest people, meaning that at some point in the book, that they asked a guard to give them the equivalent of $10,000. This is in 1989 or something. And the guards still refused. Why? Very interesting trend is that the guards were unwilling to help the buildings that was not organized. That the same guard who helps his, we have also various testimonies when there are about 20 hours of interviews with Al Jazeera. They talk a lot about all of this stuff. So there's a lot of ethnographic material beside the kind of the demographics that I talked about. So this is Salah Hashad, the pilot, he managed to contact his wife, and the background made a difference. He's married to one of the first Moroccan pharmacists after independence. So it means that she has the means, she knew exactly the medicine. Basically, they would send a note and said, well, some of us are suffering from this, and she will spend 24 hours compiling the medicine and send it to their buildings. That's how they were saved. So she played, next to Christine Dostar-Fati, she played an extraordinary role providing the. Another one was very interesting case of Nancy Twill. That's Twill, that's another Air Force pilot. She She's an American. She was teaching at the American military base in the early 1970s. She got married to Mark Twain, and they had a son when he was arrested. He simply disappeared, and she was there. She had no idea what to do. And finally, Hashad's wife asked her that you are more useful if you go back to the United States. And there she started a campaign. We have records of, that one of the State Department senior officials slipped kind of a note to Bush administration, and that's how it started. That was, it's played a major, major role. And here she is later. I mean, this is just a recent picture. The main hero of all of this is someone that is the person I interviewed is Adjutant Chef Mohammed Sharbadwi. He is the guard who was, the hero. I mean, we might have different views on this, but he took great, great risks to contact the families. They called him Jeff because he said they look exactly like the Jeff Chandler, an actor in the 1950s. He basically, when the first guard was caught, he was coming in the bus. The gendarmerie, that's the rural police, stopped him, and he passed a bunch of letters of the families to him. And if they have found those letters, he could have been executed. He kept those letters for about 5 years. He just took them, put them somewhere, and didn't say a word. And it's only after 5 years that he starts, that Hashad he slipped him a word, and then he said, okay, and he gave him the letters, and Hashad saw the letter was dated from like 5 years, and his sons and daughters must be older. What's this? He was very confused. And then he explained later that, well, this is what happened. So the story is that, I mean, to conclude, is that that this is very kind of interesting case because it's very limited. I mean, there are no external variables. There is a situation of conflict where, in a way, all of the elements of the variables are controlled. I mean, an experiment, that is really a horrific one, but it gives us a lot of information that we cannot otherwise find. So I use this example as a way to say, well, maybe when we enter conflicts, I mean, when we talk about conflicts in the Middle East, we talk about asymmetries of power. There's no way that peace could evolve because the actors are too powerful. They don't have a lot of, way to act. Agency is very limited. They are poor. They are this. But this is a case you cannot have less agency than this. I mean, you are constrained. You are basically within very defined structure. Structures don't necessarily tell us a lot about why conflicts evolve in one direction, why they endure. It's possible also that, well, sometimes that, leadership is lacking. That if the Middle East is facing the challenges of water, that the Middle East is going to run out of water soon. I mean, you can't, think of, a more serious challenge. Well, you are facing also war, civil wars, ethnic conflicts, sectarian conflicts. That's basically, I'm not saying that this is like building B, but it's like, look, I mean, the region is going in that direction where we don't see leadership, that perhaps people are not empathizing with each other, that we have to start thinking that the structure of conflict is beyond power. It is beyond material conditions, that maybe there's something, a lack of human initiative, of a human agency. So let me just stop there, and I will take some questions. I'm sorry if I went over time. Yeah.
Great. Well, we do have time for questions or comments if people have any. David?
All right, so thank you for the talk. I have various questions, but I'm just going to stick to one right now. So could you explain in a little bit more detail how exactly this concept that you mentioned at the beginning, right, emotional intelligence, like how exactly does that work for you in this project? I mean, you hinted at it a little bit at the end, but like in detail, like what exactly does the literature say? And then how exactly does it help us understand this better level of cooperation in one of the cell blocks?
Yeah, so this basically, this field of research is like you find it in political psychology and in organizations. How to help groups who are working on the same projects resolve problems. It's more than on the soft side. For example, like how do you stop bullying in schools? How do you increase the efficiency of the productivity of the staff? What when a group is working on a project, for example, in any kind of type of organization, but they have different ideas on what to do. There could be conflict. The question is that conflict over the end? Is that conflict over what tools should be used, or it is a personal conflict? And that makes a huge difference. I mean, the emotional intelligence tells us that people who are engaged in this kind of conflicts, if they are more accommodating, if they are willing to listen, if you manage to resolve some of these problems. But it's not used in situations of extreme duress. I mean, here we're talking about like severe situation. We're not talking about the Middle East. I mean, this is like war. It is almost this is laughable to think that this makes. But the point is not to say that emotional intelligence is help or that the human agency is help. It's the point to say that structure does not necessarily need to confine us. I mean, the presence of oil, the lack of water, military superiority, unevenness, those are not necessarily, those are structural constraints, but there is room to work even with those constraints. And for me, this is an example where we have exactly the same culture, the same diversity within two buildings. Exactly the same environment, eat the same food, they have the same constraints, same oppression, but one group managed to survive somehow precisely because they have different, they dealt with each other differently. I won't go as far to say, well, this can be applied. No, I'm just saying that, well, maybe we should think about this, structures of conflict don't necessarily always, decide on the outcome. That people who are engaged in those conflicts, how they perceive the enemy or how it matters. That maybe there could be some of these conflicts can be resolved, but by through leadership. And the ethnographic material is so rich in the books that in Building B, it was the only instance of physical aggression within more than 18 years of one detainee over another happened in Building B. And this happened because even though they were locked up in their cells, they never left. They didn't see the sun, for 18 years. It's almost unbelievable. Medically, three of them, the Boricat brothers, went to France after. They shook the hand of a doctor, and he told them, "I don't believe your story." So, well, we are here, look at us. He said, in these circumstances, with those kind of diet, your bones should be transparent. I shake your hands, I should collapse. If somebody told me this story, if I didn't shake your hand, I would not have believed it. So in that building, in B, was the only instance where there was physical aggression, because one day, Sherbadwi let the cells open for like this. He said, well, then I'm going to be, he was transferred to the second building, and then one of the detainees attacked another one of the three brothers. And I don't really know the exact reason. It was also in Building B, the only instance of a huge fight among two detainees, like not physical, but like, for a whole night, they were shouting at each other. It's also in that building where like three of the detainees never said a word or communicated with the rest. Let's say we're going to organize like studies of the Quran or Islamic law. They will never participate. So it is very clear that that's kind of the attitude of detainees towards each other, toward the program, whether they are willing to cooperate or not, made a big difference on the morale of the detainees.
Thank you. This is very interesting. I have tons of questions, but perhaps emotional intelligence of building A is, it's valid, and I think it's a great way to look at it. But what keeps coming to my mind is, the main thing is, oh my God, I wonder how many of these prisons exist now after all these wars, and should we be alert to them? And then the second is the old adage, the old saying, misery loves company. So if there are so many echoes, I can only imagine if somebody is going nuts and they're screaming or something, that could even drive more people crazy, because it looks like Building B had more of the psychological issues anyway. So looking at why Building B went down versus could be the mirror image, like what that could be versus the A. And it looks like you've covered all of the biasing factors. But Building B, my question also was, is there a difference between the different tribes or the different groups of people was there a higher difference in Building B from the tribes that they might have come from in Building B than A?
Yeah. So in those maps, when I talk about social networks, there is definitely same heterogeneity in terms of background. I mean, some of them are Berber. I did ask some, because for me, I was suspicious. I said, could be one of the reasons. Maybe there are the balance between those who come from Arab backgrounds, from Berber backgrounds, or something was really a reason. So I asked, said, was the Berber question ever present? Do you ever discuss it? And I said, yes. We talked about it. And they said, well, was it ever a source of conflict? Never, no. It was never an issue of conflict. I mean, these people, after 18 years being next to each other, they knew a lot about each other. I mean, it's amazing the stories they told about who they are, they come from. None of the ethnic or the bias was not one. In Building B, there was a division between, because it's just the narrative of the of the books is quite striking. It's different. That we and them, we cooperate with the other groups. When we stopped, they started. Whereas in Building A, they have a very clear, organized schedule, and they stuck to it even during disagreements about money, medicine, access to information. I asked, and I found evidence for that in the various memoirs. I said, okay, well, when you had disagreements on who's going to have access to this medicine and that the money is coming from there, and then did you still maintain that program? I said, we stuck to it to the last day. In the morning, somebody will say the Adhan. Next, they read the Quran, then discuss the Hadith, then they do their moments of silence, then discuss movies. There are stories, but in Building B, which is really interesting, that the Burikat brother unfortunately came a little bit late. They were such great narrators. So narration actually helps. That building a group over a narrative. And they told the most amazing stories about Paris, because these are very, from prominent background. They were living in Morocco. They were traveling jet set to Paris. They knew it. They tell stories about, the Saint-Germain, this restaurant here, this corner here. And the other detainees, they were like swallowing all of this. It was like, it's revived. And I'm not sure if I can show that since they arrived, the death rate went down or not. But it's clear that they energize the building, just through narration. But in Building A, there were more of those. Marzouki is one, great narrator, great reciter of the Quran. He used to recite the Quran out loud, and you will listen, he will sing to them. There are some songs of Halim Hafid and other things. So I think it is possible. This could be just a chance that Building A, it's possible that is just Building A was lucky that there were some 3 or 4 who were very dynamic. Salah Hashad created I mean, in the cell, there was only one small hole. He managed to bring in the sun. I mean, just a circle, like this, of sun inside the cell. And he managed to give each one of them that instrument, and he called it Kaburzel, which is the title of his book. Kaburzel in Moroccan refers to some the kind of fancy cookies that's made of almonds. I mean, they're shaped like a gazelle. And that instrument was so valuable, he called it Kaburzel. And the way to do it, I mean, he would take it, he used to give them palm things to clean up their cells every once in a while. He used to attach them. Every time they gave him one, he would take one branch. Every time he would take one, until he formed like a long kind of stick. And he put the cover of sardines, that like, you know, in Morocco, you know, those sardines, those cans. And he will take the part, it is like aluminum, and he will put it all the way up to that small hole. And depending on the season, whether it's October or January, you will get about like 10 minutes, I mean, I think 3 to 10 minutes in the sun, and you go and you sit in that little array of sun.
Just one quick thing. If you've ever read the memoir of Nelson Mandela, I think it supports your emotional intelligence hypothesis, because one of the stories that I remember is even when they were in prison over 20-some years, they made appointments with each other when they needed to talk to each other, even if they had all the time in the world. So that required them to actually have some sort of structure, and which helped a lot of them survive so many years.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, the reflections about the notion of time. Their first enemy was time. Like they had, I mean, now they are there. And how do you know when you are in the dark? How do you know 4 o'clock from 7? So it was completely like an aggressive, quick transformation. And the religion provided that kind of, you know, prayers. I mean, there's the Asr, there's the Maghrib, there's the Isha, and that's how they basically organized. They kept track of time. But they have to master that notion of time, that they were denied their humanity in such a radical way that they had to reestablish it by everything through, you know, prayers and chantings and.
Question here?
So social dynamics, you mentioned that led to success in Group A and the failure of Group B. Do you believe that they could be applied to the success of tribes and militias in, say, Syria and Yemen?
I will hesitate to say, well, basically that it will mechanically applied. I will say that all it takes for two groups to really get involved in some cycle of violence is the absence of leadership. If you have 4 or 5 people who are willing to negotiate, who think, who have that kind of sense of practical sense of peace building, you are going to lose a huge capital. It takes only like losing 3 or 4 of those, if they are intimidated, if they don't talk, if they don't express themselves, to have a situation of violence. So more than saying that, well, this kind of emotional intelligence is going to resolve some of the conflicts, all I'm saying is that we should be very careful when we think about structure of conflicts, that the outcome, the process, this is what international relations is about. That basically international conflict is really decided by the structure of that conflict. Hegemony, power relations, but there is something else, that sometimes peace or understanding, cooperation, can be really based on there's a whole register or epistemology of thinking that should be, discovered, even though it's not, even though it is used by business. I mean, it's kind of, well, I mean, this is really used just to increase the productive capacity in companies. But I never thought that would be really relevant. But when I was reading the memoir, I said, well, this is exactly what emotional intelligence is about. They are talking about people who have practical things to do, who are going to build corporations, and that once you start personalizing conflicts, that's what happened in Building B. I mean, it was disagreement on time. Say, for example, one said, well, begin of 9 o'clock, please, nobody talks. or if you can talk quietly with your neighbors, something that building A did. It said, at 9 o'clock, all discussions should be private with your immediate cell member, or you cannot shout because that's the time when everybody wants to rest. In building B, they could not enforce that simply because of they lost a really important moderator very early on, the first year when he arrived, the pilot, who was basically moderating this kind of conflict. But in the first year he died, and it was a big loss. That is exactly the example that I'm saying. It's like in Afghanistan. I mean, you exclude or you assassinate one person who was willing to work, and then you really have a problem because that was the only person who was willing to, leader was willing to moderate. And that's exactly what happened in Building B. They lost this pilot who was extraordinary, what bringing them together. The army still have these kind of differences. I mean, the army and the Air Force, they always have, these kind of tensions. The question of hierarchy. For example, in Building B, said, well, don't talk to me, you're no longer captain. We're all the same. That, I don't have to listen to you. So there were those kind of issues, I mean, really, I think that changed the atmosphere and made it much more difficult for inmates in Building B to kind of put their act together. So I want to be careful that, I mean, the responsibility of the death of these people has been established. That it is the Moroccan government's responsibility. There have been hearings. I mean, I'm not saying that people, detainees in Building B should be blamed for what happened to them. But I'm saying that it was a different atmosphere. And from what I can see, I'm still working on this. From what I can see, I can already tell that the explanations, the structural explanations, don't really provide sufficient evidence to say that's the reason why there is discrepancy. And discrepancy is huge. I mean, it's simply, it has to be something to explain it.
It's fascinating. Thank you. I'm a psychologist, a political psychologist. So if you think of Khrushchev and Kennedy, who we knew a lot about their intelligence, particularly Khrushchev and his emotional intelligence, like the shoes, we all know were a ploy. He had those shoes. So if we were to think about our leaders in the Middle East, or let's take ISIS as an extreme, are you saying that the more we could know about each of these people, the more we would be able to enter into a more diplomatic, the more we would be able to enter their minds and understand what we need to do if we met with them, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think that yes, knowing in one of if you are a political psychologist, I mean, there are a number of specificities on how, to be aware of your own interests, to be aware also of the interests of the others, to be aware of the fear of the others. I mean, there is a whole, list of specific situations where behavior can make a difference in terms of knowing the other. But this doesn't mean that there is no conflicts. I mean, this is really for me the most interesting thing, in that in Building A there were a lot of conflicts, but they were not personal, they were not ideological, they were not ethnic, they were not about religiosity. In their statement, they all say we had zero understanding of religion. We had faith. We have our own interpretations of the Quran because they discussed the Quran, they discussed the surahs, and they had divergent discussions of this. They disagreed on objective material things. The group received X amount of medicine, such and such is suffering, and yet he's not receiving his medicine. We received $1,000. What happened to so they have a system of accounting for distribution, and those actually. For me, I mean, it's almost saying that, well, I mean, those conflicts can be constructive in a way that that you can disagree on material things, but you never go beyond, those agreements. You do not personalize it. I mean, in some of the conflicts in Building B, they became personal conflicts. I mean, they were between one specific person and another, and I'm not going to get the details, but it was pretty nasty. That was only one instance. I mean, in 18 years, one instance, but still, I think that it had an impact on the other, especially if it was between one senior officer, or at least an officer, and so it had an impact on the other detainees. That if these are really the people who are supposed to lead us or something, they are fighting like this, then it's really like you lose hope.
Maybe I'll take the liberty of asking the last question, or one technical question first, is what did they do with the money when the prisoners got it? But my larger question has to do with kind of the post-Tazmalt Morocco, and if you know anything about the trajectories of the prisoners who survived after, and if they were in any sense co-opted by the Mahsen, which people accuse Sarfati of being eventually when he came back, and what sort of, it's so interesting to me that you're working on Tazmalt now. And what is Tazmalt in public discourse in Morocco today? And does the king, whose father, after all, was responsible for this, does he acknowledge this? And to what extent is it government discourse?
Yeah, well, the government did acknowledge I don't think it's acknowledged the responsibility for it, but it did provide some compensations from all the discussions that they had with those who survived were not very happy. They said that the criteria were really, just arbitrary, that they were not compensated as the other civilian. So there's discontent, clearly. Some of them just disappeared from public sphere. Like they are living their lives privately and they don't, they are not active. Some like Marzouki, Rais and others. Marzouki is still very active today. I mean, I just saw him like 2 weeks ago on some kind of campaign for journalists who has been harassed and been, so he's still very much active. On the technical question on the money, basically, this is really amazing. They actually voted within the term camp. This shows you how much organizations they had, how much trust they had. They said, okay, well, 1/3 is going to stay with us, and 1/3 is going to go to the detainee whose family provide the money, and 1/3 is going to go to the guard. And who's going to be in charge of the medicine? I said, well, take a vote. So they all, one by one, took a vote. So there was actually the beginning of some kind of institution of deliberation about this, and why they should do it, and how, and that's how they, I think it reflects a little bit the maturity of the detainees. So it was a very elaborate system of course there was discontent also. Many complained that some prisoners could have been saved if only they received medicine earlier. That where some families were privileged because they had money and therefore they had more contact, more information. Some never heard. But it's really interesting, even you don't need to have, you do need those kind of opposition, that kind of criticism. I mean, Rais was very militant, saying he wanted to make sure that there is just distribution of the money, just access to information, to medicine. And there are groups, there are some who never say the word. They just say, we're going to go along. So it's not like if there was some kind of homogeneous or some were very active and militant. They wanted to make sure that everything is distributed justly. Others said, no, we cannot take so many risks if we want to be just. I mean, we will be cut. And others who simply were followers. It's basically the reflection of how society is. That some people are just marginal to what is happening. So.
Thank you so much for a fascinating
Oh, thank you. Thank you.